In the depths of space, where no light should reach, an ancient artifact drifted silent, forgotten, and shrouded in mystery. It was a suit of armor that had rejected every alien being who had dared to seek its power. For eons, it had remained untouchable, its secrets locked away, until one lone human stumbled into the void and became its unlikely master. What was once a legend became his burden, and now Elias must face the truth. The armor wasn't just a tool of power, it was a choice that would reshape the fate of the universe. In the distant reaches of space, an ancient artifact drifted through the void, its presence haunting and enigmatic. It was neither a weapon nor a tool, but something far more profound, a suit of armor that had existed since before the birth of galaxies. Its origins were shrouded in mystery, lost to the sands of time. The armor had rejected all who sought to claim it. Alien races from across countless galaxies had tried, their efforts spanning generations, yet none could unlock its secrets. It was as though the armor had a will of its own, choosing only those it deemed worthy or perhaps unworthy. Over millennia, the suit became little more than a legend, whispered about in the darkest corners of forgotten civilizations. Its reputation spread, and with it, the belief that it was cursed, that only the worthy or the truly desperate would ever be able to wear it. There were countless stories of those who had ventured into the unknown, driven by the lure of power or glory, only to vanish without a trace. Those who returned spoke of a sense of rejection, as though the universe itself conspired to prevent them from claiming what was rightfully theirs. The armor had become a phantom, a force that defied explanation, leaving behind only silence. It wasn't a thing of war or conquest, it seemed to have no purpose other than to remain untouched, a silent observer of the chaos that unfolded across the cosmos. But now something had changed. A lone human, lost in the void of space, stumbled upon the artifact's resting place. Their ship drifted silently through the lifeless expanse, powered by the last flickers of a dying star system. The human didn't seek power or glory, didn't even know the significance of what they were about to discover. They were not a hero from ancient tales or a warrior drawn by ambition. They were a survivor, adrift in the cold abyss of a universe that had long abandoned their homeworld. The name of this human was Elias. His home had burned under the weight of war, leaving him adrift with nothing but the echoes of memories. The stars offered no solace, no purpose, and his journey had become one of mere survival. His ship, once a symbol of hope, was now little more than a vessel drifting aimlessly through the cosmos. The light from distant stars barely reached his eyes, and the cold, endless expanse of space stretched far beyond his sight. But even in the void, something drew him forward, something beyond reason or logic. As Elias's ship entered a swirling nebula of chaotic colors, he saw something beyond the stars, an anomaly that didn't fit the chaotic dance of the cosmos. It was the artifact, a gleaming silhouette against the backdrop of swirling dust. The surface shimmered faintly, its presence defying explanation. It wasn't a mere structure, but something alive, pulsing with a strange, unknown energy. Elias was drawn by curiosity, by the same desperation that had kept him alive in a universe that seemed intent on forgetting him. His ship vibrated as if in response to his presence, a low hum resonating through its hollow frame. The air inside his vessel grew cold, charged with a quiet, unseen energy. The armor exuded a presence that felt neither malevolent nor welcoming, it simply was. He knew little of the tales surrounding the artifact, but something deep within him felt the connection, a pull that refused to be ignored. With trembling hands, Elias extended his fingers toward the surface of the armor. A strange sensation coursed through his body, like electricity sparking beneath his skin. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of light exploded from the artifact, illuminating the surrounding void. The armor was alive, aware of him. For an instant, everything froze. The fabric of space seemed to ripple as though reacting to some unknown force. Then, a faint whisper echoed in Elias's mind, a voice not of sound, but of thought. It wasn't a language he could understand, yet he felt its meaning. Chosen. The armor didn't ask. It claimed him, as if there had never been any doubt. Elias stumbled back, his heart pounding. The armor didn't just accept him, it had been waiting for him. Elias stumbled back, his heart pounding. The armor didn't just accept him, it had been waiting for him. The silence of space had never felt so heavy, so oppressive. The surge of light that had erupted from the artifact had subsided, leaving only the faint hum of energy that resonated through his body. Elias stared at the suit, his fingers still tingling from the strange connection. He could feel the armor's presence pressing against his skin, as if it had merged with him in some incomprehensible way. The void stretched around him, vast and endless, but now he felt different, changed. For a moment, he could hardly comprehend what had just happened. The whispers in his mind were still there, faint but persistent. Chosen. That word echoed again and again. Elias tried to shake it off, but the sensation refused to leave. The armor wasn't just a relic, it was alive, or at least some part of it was. It had chosen him whether he wanted it or not. His survival instinct told him to run, to put as much distance between himself and this mysterious artifact as possible, but something deeper kept him rooted in place. The longer he stared, the more he felt a pull toward the armor. It wasn't a physical pull, it was something far more subtle, far more insidious. He could feel it tugging at his very essence, whispering promises of power, of purpose. But what kind of power? And what purpose? The questions burned in his mind, but no answers came. The armor had been waiting for someone, had been waiting for him. Elias didn't know. All he knew was that it had chosen him, and now there was no turning back. With trembling hands, he reached out again, this time with more determination. The armor responded almost immediately, shifting in subtle ways. It adjusted to his touch, molding itself to his form. The once rigid metal softened, becoming pliable as though it had a mind of its own. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't just cold, unfeeling metal, it felt alive, as though the very fabric of the cosmos had become one with him. Elias could feel the faintest pulse, a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Panic set in. How could something so ancient, something that had rejected countless others, accept him? What made him different? He was just a survivor, a wanderer lost in space. He wasn't strong, wasn't destined for greatness. He had no grand ambitions or desires for power. Yet here he was, bearing the very thing that had been denied to countless others. Elias's mind raced, but his body felt strangely calm. The armor was now a part of him, not just worn, but integrated. He could feel its power coursing through his veins, stronger than he could have imagined. It wasn't just a suit, it was an extension of himself. And yet, he couldn't ignore the feeling of isolation that began to creep in. The armor had chosen him, but he wasn't sure whether that was a gift or a curse. The very thing that had rejected others now pulsed against his skin, a constant reminder of his connection to something far beyond his understanding. He drifted, lost in thought as the stars wheeled around him, their light growing ever more distant. The void stretched endlessly, but it no longer felt empty. The armor seemed to draw him forward, its presence growing stronger with each passing moment. And as Elias's thoughts began to settle, the whispers returned. To restore balance. What balance? The universe was vast and chaotic. How could he, one lone human, hope to impose order on something so vast, so broken? The questions loomed larger than ever, but deep down, Elias knew he couldn't ignore them. The armor wasn't just a relic of the past, it was a force that had waited for someone like him. Now, he had to figure out what that meant, and what his role in the cosmos truly was. As Elias examined the artifact, the armor began to shift. It responded to him, adjusting itself as though it could sense his form, his needs. The once stiff metal became malleable, conforming to his body. The suit rejected its past, a history of alien hosts, and welcomed the one it had always sought. Elias could feel its power coursing through him. Strength surged in his limbs, but it wasn't just physical. His senses sharpened, his thoughts became clearer, his very being altered. The armor didn't just cover him, it became part of him. The realization dawned on him slowly. The armor wasn't merely an object, it was alive, entwined with something far greater than himself. Every movement of the suit, every subtle adjustment, seemed to echo with the same ancient intelligence that had guided its creation. It wasn't made by any civilization Elias knew of. It was something older, something that had been here long before the stars themselves. He felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear. What had he become? The armor had chosen him, but now he couldn't tell if he was truly himself or something more. His body moved with a grace and strength he had never known, and yet his mind wrestled with the unsettling truth he wasn't in control of this power. It was guiding him, shaping him, whether he willed it or not. The armor didn't speak in words, but its presence spoke louder than any voice ever could. Elias could feel its intentions, its purpose, and while some part of him struggled against it, another part welcomed the certainty of its connection. It was as if the suit had been waiting for him, lying dormant, watching, observing until the right moment had come. And now that moment was here. The armor's power wasn't just physical strength. It extended beyond the tangible, beyond what Elias could even grasp. His senses had become sharper, his thoughts clearer, but along with these gifts came a deeper awareness, a sense of something far beyond his comprehension. The whispers had been there from the moment he touched the armor, but now they had become more than just murmurs in his mind. They felt like part of him, like they were guiding him, leading him toward something he couldn't fully grasp. Chosen, the whispers echoed again, more insistent this time, to restore balance. But what balance? How could one lone human restore balance to a galaxy that had long since lost its way? The question churned in his mind, relentless and unanswered. The cosmos were vast and filled with chaos, teeming with countless races that had sought power only to lose themselves to it. Elias had heard of these stories of civilizations that rose and fell, consumed by their own greed, their own desires for dominance. The armor had rejected all of them, and now it had chosen him. But why? Elias stared at his reflection in the suit's polished surface, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir deep inside him, fear. Not the kind of fear that drives you to flee from danger, but the kind that comes with the realization that you are no longer the person you once were. The armor wasn't just a tool. It wasn't something he could simply discard. It had become a part of him, a force beyond his control, and he didn't know if he could live with it. The whispers continued, becoming louder, more persistent. Restore balance. But how? The universe was fractured, broken by centuries of conflict and greed. What balance could one person possibly bring? Elias took a deep breath, closing his eyes, trying to quiet the voices in his head. But they refused to be silenced. The armor felt heavier now, not just in the physical sense, but in the weight of its purpose. He could feel the responsibility bearing down on him. The universe had waited for someone like him, someone flawed, someone uncertain, and now that he had been chosen, there was no going back. His home had burned, his world was gone, and now he was no longer just a survivor. He was something more, a guardian of balance, whether he wanted it or not. And as the armor pulsed against his skin, Elias knew there was no escape from the fate that had been thrust upon him. The whispers had become a constant presence in Elias's mind, to restore balance. The words echoed with a haunting clarity, but their meaning remained elusive. How could he, one lone human, possibly hope to fix a galaxy fractured by eons of conflict and destruction? The armor wasn't just a tool, it was a burden, and Elias couldn't ignore the growing weight of responsibility that came with it. He wasn't sure what balance even looked like, let alone how he could bring it about. As he drifted further through the void, searching for answers, the armor remained both his companion and his confinement. Its power had become a part of him impossible to separate. He could feel its presence coursing through his veins, guiding his every move, but the silence of space only deepened his doubts. Elias had spent his life running from the past, trying to survive in a universe that had turned its back on him, but now he was forced to confront something much greater. The visions began without warning. At first they were fleeting images, snatches of memory from those who had worn the armor before him. Alien figures, their faces blurred, their histories lost in time. He saw their triumphs and their failures, the mistakes they had made, and the paths they had taken that led to their downfall. The armor had rejected them all. The visions came in fragments, glimpses of worlds consumed by war, of civilizations brought to their knees by their own thirst for power. Each image was a reminder that the armor had never belonged to anyone who sought to dominate. Elias understood now that the armor wasn't a weapon or a source of dominance. It had never been meant to be wielded in pursuit of personal gain. The armor was meant to restore balance, but how could he do that when he didn't even understand what balance truly meant? He couldn't shake the feeling that the universe itself was testing him. The armor had chosen him, but had it chosen wrong? The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Chosen. To restore balance. They were no longer simple words, they were commands, guiding his every thought. Elias felt as though he were being pulled towards something far beyond his control, as if the very fabric of reality was reshaping itself around him. But what exactly was he supposed to do? What did balance look like in a universe fractured by endless war and greed? As he drifted further into the unknown, Elias began to piece together the fragments of knowledge the armor had offered him. He saw the ancient conflicts that had consumed entire star systems, civilizations that had once stood as empires but now lay in ruin. The armor had been a silent witness to it all, watching from the shadows, waiting for someone to emerge who could understand its true purpose. The question lingered, could he be that person? Could he be the one to stop the cycle of destruction? Elias wasn't sure. He had no answers, only the growing sense that the armor was shaping him into something far beyond what he had ever imagined. The strength that coursed through his body wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, something that connected him to the very fabric of existence itself. In the quiet of the void, Elias realized he wasn't just running from the past anymore. The past had caught up to him. The armor had chosen him, and now there was no turning back. He could feel its power shaping him, reshaping his destiny. But what lay ahead was still unknown, and the weight of that uncertainty pressed heavily on his shoulders. The whispers continued, louder than ever, but Elias no longer resisted them. He couldn't. The armor had become more than just a tool, it had become his destiny. The universe had waited for someone like him, someone flawed, someone uncertain. And now that he had been chosen, he had no choice but to embrace the role that had been forced upon him. The balance of the cosmos hung in the balance, and Elias was the only one who could restore it, whether he was ready or not. Elias drifted deeper into the void, his mind consumed by the weight of what the armor had become. The galaxy stretched infinitely before him, its endless expanse only amplifying the feeling of insignificance that had followed him since he first discovered the artifact. He wasn't a hero, nor had he ever sought power. All he wanted was to survive, but now survival seemed far less important than the responsibility that the armor had thrust upon him. The visions came more frequently now, flashes of history, of conflict and destruction, of civilizations that had risen and fallen. They weren't dreams, not figments of his imagination. The armor was showing him what had happened before, what he needed to understand if he was to fulfill whatever purpose it had for him. The universe, he realized, wasn't just fractured, it was broken beyond repair, or so it seemed. Elias struggled to make sense of the images. They haunted him. He saw worlds engulfed by war, empires consumed by their own greed, leaders who had fallen to their own desires. The armor had witnessed it all, untouched by the chaos it observed, and now it had chosen him, a lone human with no purpose beyond survival. What made him different from those who had tried and failed before? The whispers never stopped. They came in his dreams, in moments of silence, echoing in his mind as though they were part of his very thoughts. Chosen. Restore balance. They weren't commands, not in the traditional sense, but they were persistent, impossible to ignore. Elias couldn't tell if they came from within him or from the armor itself, but the message was clear. He was meant for something greater. But what could a single person do against a galaxy so broken? Elias grappled with that question, trying to make sense of his role. The universe wasn't a place that rewarded the weak or the insignificant. It punished them, leaving them adrift, forgotten, like so many before him. Yet here he was, bound to something he didn't fully understand, something that refused to let go. As he drifted through the void, he began to feel the weight of the armor more than ever before. It wasn't just the physical sensation of its presence, it was the connection, the understanding that it had chosen him. His body felt stronger, yes, but it wasn't just strength. It was something deeper, more fundamental. The armor had awakened something within him, something he couldn't deny. Elias knew now that running from the past wasn't an option. The armor had found him, and with it, the truth had become unavoidable. The galaxy didn't just need fixing, it needed something more. Balance wasn't about eliminating conflict. It wasn't about creating peace in the traditional sense. Balance was about something far greater, something far more complex. The visions kept coming, but one in particular refused to leave his mind. A memory, or perhaps a vision of what was to come, a shattered world, its skies burning, its oceans blackened. He saw ruins, cities reduced to dust, and the echoes of voices lost in the chaos. The images filled him with both fear and determination. The armor showed him the destruction, but it also showed him something else, a way forward. Elias knew he couldn't ignore these visions, these memories, however fragmented they were. The armor had always been more than a suit. It was a force of nature, a presence that carried with it the weight of countless lives and countless failures. But now it had found him, and he couldn't escape the truth. Whether he wanted it or not, he was bound to it. He didn't know where the journey would take him. He didn't know what the armor would demand of him next. But he did know one thing: the whispers wouldn't stop, and the armor wouldn't let go. The universe had been broken for too long, and now it had chosen him to restore the balance. Whether he was ready or not, there was no turning back. Elias sat alone in the silence of space, the weight of the armor pressing against his chest like a constant reminder. The visions of destruction, of worlds falling into chaos, hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown more vivid, more real. The armor was showing him not just the past, but fragments of what was to come, a future he couldn't ignore. The universe wasn't merely fractured, it was spiraling toward oblivion, and Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he was the only one who could stop it. He didn't ask for this responsibility. He didn't seek the power that now coursed through his veins. All he wanted was to survive, to drift among the stars until the void finally swallowed him. But the armor had other plans. It had chosen him, and now he had become something far greater than he had ever intended. The whispers were louder than ever, whispering secrets he didn't understand. Restore balance. They didn't offer guidance, didn't give him answers. They were just reminders, persistent and unrelenting, drilling into his mind until he could no longer tell if they were his thoughts or something beyond him. The armor pulsed in sync with the whispers, as if it too were urging him toward some unseen purpose. Elias clenched his fists, feeling the surge of power within him. The armor was no longer just a suit, it had become a part of him. Its presence wasn't just physical. It had altered him, reshaped his very essence. His senses were sharper, his mind clearer. The emptiness of space no longer felt so desolate. Instead, he could feel the fabric of the cosmos itself, the energy that flowed through the stars. But that connection came with a cost. He could feel the weight of countless lives pressing down on him. The armor had witnessed civilizations rise and fall, entire worlds consumed by their own ambitions. It had rejected them all, leaving behind only ruins and ghosts of what once was. Elias could feel the echoes of their suffering, the cries of the broken and the lost. The armor wasn't just a relic, it was a witness to the universe's slow decay. The more he thought about it, the more Elias realized that the armor wasn't interested in conquest or domination. It wasn't a tool meant to give power, it was meant to ensure something far more elusive: balance. But what did balance even mean in a universe as vast and chaotic as this? The questions plagued him, consuming his thoughts as the void stretched endlessly around him. He remembered the visions, the destroyed worlds, the empires crumbling into nothingness. The armor had shown him these horrors, but it had also shown him something else, the possibility of restoration. Was that what he was meant to do? Restore the balance that had been lost long ago? But how could one person, one human, hope to bring about something so immense? The universe didn't reward the weak or the insignificant. It discarded them. Elias closed his eyes, trying to quiet the chaos in his mind. The armor responded to his thoughts, vibrating gently against his skin as though it could sense his uncertainty. Restore balance. The words echoed in his head again, louder this time, more demanding. There was no escape from them. The armor wasn't going to let him forget. He knew that the path ahead would be anything but clear. The visions had shown him glimpses of what was to come, but they were incomplete. Fragmented. He could see the ruins of worlds, the remnants of civilizations that had once held great power. They had all fallen, one after the other, consumed by their own desires, their own greed. The armor had rejected them all. Elias felt the cold grip of doubt creep in. How could someone like him, so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, hope to fix what had already fallen apart? He had no grand plans, no knowledge of how to lead. All he had was his survival instinct and now the armor. But something inside him refused to let go of the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could fulfill the armor's call. Maybe the universe had waited too long for someone like him. Flawed, unsure, but alive. The whispers echoed louder in his mind. Restore balance. Elias couldn't run from it anymore. The armor had chosen him, and now, whether he was ready or not, he had no choice but to accept his role in a universe that had long since lost its way. Elias stared out into the void, his mind a storm of doubt and uncertainty. The galaxy stretched before him, vast and cold, but it wasn't just the emptiness that terrified him. It was the weight of the responsibility that the armor had placed upon him. Restore balance. The words haunted him, echoing in his mind like a mantra. But what did that even mean? He had spent his life running from the past, trying to forget the pain, the loss, the emptiness that had consumed his existence. Yet now, the past seemed inescapable. The visions of destruction, of broken worlds, of empires falling into ruin, they weren't just memories. They were his future. The armor had seen it all before, and now so had he. Elias clenched his fists, the strength of the armor coursing through his veins. He could feel it pulsing, alive, connected to something far greater than himself. It wasn't just a suit, it was a part of him. The armor had chosen him, and though he had never sought power, he couldn't deny the surge of force within him. But that power wasn't what terrified him. It was the responsibility, the impossible task ahead. How could one person bring balance to a universe so fractured? How could he hope to fix what countless others had failed to restore? The armor had rejected every alien, every leader who had sought domination or control. It had waited patiently for someone different. Someone who wouldn't seek power, but rather someone who would shoulder the burden of restoring what had been lost. The question loomed larger than ever. Why him? He wasn't strong, wasn't destined for greatness. He was just a survivor, a wanderer lost in space, trying to escape his past. And yet, here he was, bound to something far beyond his understanding. The armor had chosen him, but what did that choice mean? Could he live up to the responsibility it demanded? Elias closed his eyes, the whispers louder than ever. Restore balance. They echoed in his mind. But now, they weren't distant. They felt close, personal. The armor wasn't something he could cast aside, nor was it something he could understand in full. It had become a part of him, shaping his thoughts, his actions, his very destiny. He could still feel the weight of the visions, the ruined worlds, the silent cries of civilizations lost to their own hubris. The armor had witnessed it all, but it had never intervened. It had chosen to reject the empires that sought control and power, those who sought domination, greed, and conquest. Instead, it had waited for someone who wouldn't seek to dominate, but rather someone who might restore balance. Elias's hands trembled as he realized what that meant. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was something else, something the universe had never expected. The armor had chosen him not because of his strength or his knowledge, but because of his uncertainty, his fear, his reluctance. But that didn't make the burden any lighter. The armor pulsed again, as if it were responding to his thoughts, guiding him. The whispers became more insistent. To restore balance. The words pressed against him, an endless reminder of the task he couldn't fully comprehend. He wasn't a leader. He didn't have the answers, but somehow he had to find them. The armor had waited for someone like him, someone flawed, someone lost. Maybe that was enough, or maybe it wasn't. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the armor pressing down on him. The void stretched around him, endless and cold, but beneath the surface, he could feel something else, a spark, a glimmer of hope. He didn't know if it was enough, but he had no choice but to keep moving forward. The armor had chosen him. Now, whether he was ready or not, he had to embrace the path ahead. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Horizon Stories for more thrilling tales of science fiction and adventure. The universe is vast, and the next journey might just redefine everything you thought you knew. Stay tuned.